Red. Oh no. Red. It was rare for an inpatient to be transferred to another hospital in the dead of night. Normally, said process took place during the day, and in the morning at that. After all, there was typically a need to look into whether the ambulance ride and procedures at the other hospital could have potentially negative effects on the patient's health beforehand. Maybe that's not a problem for a place as big as Kichiki Hospital, though, thought a nurse as she reviewed some paperwork.
申し訳ありませんね。こんな時間に。
The aging man who brought her the documents flashed an ingratiating smile.
いえ、もともとそちらの患者さんですから。
The nurse double-checked the patient's name written on the transfer documents. Erika Yaginuma. Damn. See, I knew something was going to happen to her. I knew something was going to happen to her. I knew there had to be a reason they would bother showing her to us, right? Now, I thought she might get caught up in, like, the remodels, right? But that's the thing. We know that Yaginuma's sister got raped by their father, got abused, because, like, originally she, like, when he wanted to hit, young Yaginuma, was it Uroichi? That's his name. I'm not going to call him Uroichi. He's Yaginuma. But whenever his dad would go to hit him, she would, like, take his place, and then as she got older, it developed into more than just hitting. So, actually, it wouldn't surprise me if there was a possibility that, actually, I think that was mentioned at some point, wasn't it? That she had gotten pregnant. And is that when she tried to kill herself? Was when she realized she was pregnant? I think that was the case. I can't check my notes right now because obviously we're not Reiji, but even if I could, I doubt I could. It would tell me, Yaginuma's full backstory. I believe that was the case, though. The poor woman had been in a coma for over a decade now. She'd been transferred to this hospital a few years back after a series of incidents shook the Kichiki Pathological Research Institute. That said, they hadn't treated her in any meaningful way. Not out of apathy, though. There was simply little anyone could do for a coma patient other than provide them with an IV and shift them around in bed several times a day to prevent bed sores. Even now, she was lying on the stretcher with her eyes closed as though she were merely sleeping.
それではよろしくお願いします。
わかりました。
The nurse and one of her coworkers lifted the stretcher. The man circled around to the back of the ambulance, emblazoned with the same Kichiki hospital, and opened its doors. The nurses loaded the patient into the rear of the vehicle, taking great care not to drop her or bump her into anything. There, they secured the patient to the ambulance with belts and shut the doors.
何かありましたら明日以降、病院の方にお問い合わせください。
The man got into the passenger seat with those parting words. Damn. Just took her like that. He pretended to be a Kichiki hospital employee and just nabbed her like that. That's wild. I was just grabbing my coat, figuring I might as well get to work now that Yukari had left for school. Phone? Phone. When the phone rang, foiling those plans.
もしもし。
朽木病院の山之内と申しますが。
Well, guess I expected her to call my place.
そうですが、どうかしましたか。
ご相談したいことがありまして。
それは構いませんが。
すみません。よろしくお願いいたします。
Kahara hung up. I would have appreciated if she'd at least given me an idea of why she wanted me over, but whatever. At any rate, I donned my coat with that out of the way. Before leaving, I decided to call Ozmi ahead of time to let him know I'd be late helping him with the Rokushiki hunt today. I parked in the hospital's parking lot. Okay, time to find out what the deal is. Once inside, I approached the nurse manning the reception desk.
失礼。山之内先生はどちらに。
時坂様でいらっしゃいますね。
Guess she let them know I was coming. Still, put me his office, huh? Guess this isn't a simple social call.
失礼します。
I opened the door to the director's office.
時坂さん、お待ちしておりました。
Kahara and Fumiya were standing inside.
何か問題が起こったようです。
The gloom on Fumiya's visage told me as much.
以前こちらに入院されていた柳沼恵理子さんのことな。
Yaginuma's sister, huh? I'd heard she'd been in a coma for over a decade after a failed suicide attempt. The Yaginuma told me some time back that she'd been transferred to another hospital.
今朝転院先の病院から電話がありまして、こちら朽木病院に戻ったと聞かされて。
待ってください。エリコさんが再び朽木病院に転院したということをあちらがおっしゃったということですよね。
ええ、そうです。こちらとしても寝耳に水でして。
エリコさんが行方不明になっ。
そういうことになります。
Fumiya nodded.
先ほど先方の病院へ僕が確認に向かいましたが、現れたのは中年の男性で、うちで使われているものと同じ書類を持ってきていたようです。
救急車は本当にこちらの車だったのですか？
あちらの話では暗かったからよく見ていなかったそうですが、
That's why he did it in the dark of night.
使われた形跡はありましたか？
昨日は動かしていないはずなのですが。
Guess that all but seals it then.
何か心当たりはありませんか？
I looked at Kahara and Fumiya in the eye.
いいえ、転院の要請はこちらから出したと言われたのですが。
家族の方の事情があると説明を受けたそうですが。
That'd be bullshit, considering Yaginuma was the only one left whom she could call family. And I doubted he'd pull a stunt like this behind everyone's backs.
柳沼、弟さんに確認は取りましたか？
いいえ、あちらは警察の方ですので、大ごとになる前にまず時坂さんに相談をと思いまして。
I really didn't want to give that man any further cause for concern, since he was still in the hospital and all. Unfortunately, it was also plausible that this had been the work of a criminal who held a grudge against him, one who wanted payback by kidnapping his sister.
連れ去った中年男性の容姿などは聞いていますか？
ええ、それなのですが、聞いている限りだとどうしても斉藤先生。
なんだって。
Why would he kidnap Yaginuma's sister? Does he want revenge for all those years he was kept under Yaginuma's lock and key?
新聞で彼が脱走しているというのは見ましたが。
それを調べるにはやはり柳沼に説明する必要が。
Begged me to do it, but we had no other choice.
では自分はすぐに柳沼の元へ向かいます。朽木先生は引き続き
わかりました。こちらに目撃したあちらの看護婦の話をまとめましたので。
I took the papers Fumiya handed me and hurried out of the office. I drove over to the police hospital in Irabashi as fast as I could. Well, I'd considered calling Wozmi to let him know. I'd figured that could wait until after getting Yaginuma's read of the situation first. I entered Yaginuma's room to find the man reading a newspaper in bed.
柳沼。
何かあったんですか？
Yaginuma glanced at me and folded up the newspaper.
ああ。いいか、柳沼。
僕は落ち着いていますよ。何せ先ほどまで鎮痛剤が効いていましたからね。
Yaginuma shrugged.
柳沼恵理子さんが病院から姿を消した。六式の関与が疑われている。
何ですって？
Yaginuma furrowed his brow.
今はまだ俺が話を聞いただけで警察には届けていない。誘拐と考えれば警察の動きは少ない方がいいと思うが。
However, maybe that was pointless, considering that not only had a high-ranking officer's sister been kidnapped, but the culprit was also possibly a man who was already at large.
上には僕から話をしますので、先輩は伏せていてください。どうせ六式を追っていかなければならないのですからね。
ああ。
Yaginuma took the news a lot better than I expected. Couldn't tell if I had the sedative to thank for that one, or if it was a huge weight off my chest that he hadn't gone berserk or anything like that at all the same. I didn't even want to imagine what a mess it would have been if we'd had to tie him down to his bed to keep him from running off on his own. Yaginuma's already got this covered, and it's probably best that I don't bring Uozumi into this, all things considered. Guess I should try her instead. Her? I made a few calls and pulled up to the Kichiki hospital again. There I parked next to an ambulance at the parking lot. It was a Toyopet Masterline. The name Kichiki Hospital embellished its doors. Bet money on this being the one that Rokushiki used.
時坂さん。
Kara emerged from the hospital after spotting me.
山之内先生。救急車はいつもここに止められているんですか？
ええ、おそらくは。 院長が言っていたのはこのタイヤの跡ですね。
Otto pointed to the asphalt ground. There's indeed tire tracks there. So that means... I examined the ground just outside the driver's seat. Fortunately, any damning footprints had long since been wiped out by countless pairs belonging to all kinds of different staff and patients. As such, I couldn't tell which ones had belonged to the driver. Sure would help if I knew what shoes Rokushiki was wearing. I nearly opened the door, but stopped myself right in the nick of time. Oops, there might be fingerprints on it. Since I didn't have the equipment to dust for prints, I settled for studying the chrome-plated doorknob carefully instead. Okay, this is a handle, so the thumb would have gone somewhere around here.
先ほど院長が車の中も調べていましたよ。
そうですか。
Oh well, guess there's no point checking for prints then. Besides, Rokushiki wasn't the clumsy type. He wouldn't have been careless enough to leave his own fingerprints behind. In any case, with nothing left to stop me, I opened the door and scanned the interior. It looked clean as far as I could tell. Nothing in there that would point to the driver anyway. What's more, not only was their ashtray spotless, but the only things I found in the dashboard were the vehicle's inspection certificate and the like.
ダメか。
Couldn't infer how far it had gone from the mileage meter alone, and I doubted the hospital would have any records of what I had read yesterday.
この救急車が実際に亡くなっていることに気づいた人はいますか？
昨晩当直だった人にも聞いてみたのですが。
詳しくお話を伺ってもよろしいですか？
ええ、それは構わないと思いますが。あ、ちょうどこちらに来るようです。
Turned around to check where Kahato was looking.
おや、何やら探偵のようなことをしているようだね。
あなたですか。
非常勤が当直でいたら悪いのかい？
Don't go putting words in my mouth.
この車がなくなっていたのを目撃したそうですが。
ああ、確か午後8時58分頃だったな。手洗いから戻ってくる途中、そこの窓から外を見たときに。
やけに時間が具体的ですね。
部屋に戻ったとき、ちょうどラジオの時報が鳴ったからね。逆算するとそのくらいさ。
では、その後はどうでしたか？
知らないな。そもそも救急車がないことだって気にも留めていなかったんだ。今日聞かれて初めてこの車がなかったことを思い出しただけだからね。
そうですか。
ちなみにその時間に救急車が使われていたという記録はありません。
救急車の鍵はどちらにありましたか？
すぐに出動できるように普段は車に差しっぱなしだったそうです。今は外していますが。
Meaning anyone could have taken it, huh? And Rokushiki, being a former employee here, would have probably known that. Was that why he'd stolen one? Just then, I spotted Masaki approaching from the road with Toji in tow.
おや、まさきくんはまた別の女性を連れているのか？
Yeah, I wouldn't make those jokes around Toji. Much as I generally didn't mind a joke at Masaki's expense, I needed silence from the peanut gallery at the moment.
六式誠の捜索だって。
ああ、悪いな当時。こいつ一人だと頼りなくてね。
When I was making the jab, however, it was a different story.
やめてくださいよ。
で、お前も概要は知っているよな。
柳沼さんのお姉さんが言うか。
まだ断定はできないが、そういうことで間違いないだろ
六式の居場所を探ればいいのか。しかし私はそいつと面識がないし。
そのあたりは正木がよく知っている。いや、あまり知らない方が探しやすいかもしれない。
どういうことですか？
奴が行きそうなところ、過去に関わりがあった場所などはすでに警察が調べているからな。
難しい注文だな。
Toji smirked drawly.
身を隠せそうな場所はお前の方が詳しいだろ。
確かにな。わかった。探してみよう。
ああ、よろしく頼む。
Masaki followed Toji over to her office in Ueno.
まずは六式が隠れられそうな場所を挙げていかなければならない。
Toji unfurled a map of Tokyo across her desk.
時坂さんの話では目白のこの辺りで脱走し、その後上野で目撃されているそうです。
行動範囲は絞れないな。都内にいると仮定して六式にゆえんのある場所が。
Toji marked an area on the map.
広範囲に散らばっていますね。これじゃ逆に無関係な場所を絞るのも難しいですよ。
地域を絞るのは無理だろうな。ただドヤ街や闇市跡のように近くても内情を探りにくい場所はいくらでもある。
そんな場所に昏睡しているエリコさんを運び入れますかね。
それもそう。
Toji nodded as she procured more papers from a drawer.
都内にある廃病院の一覧だ。患者を運び込むのならば、
結構ありますね。
戦時中に動員され、そのまま戻ってこられなかった医者も結構。
今回もそういった場所を使っていると。
可能性は低いがね。
Toji compared the list to her map.
近場から行ってみようか。
Okay, okay. Masuki and Toji walked from Ueno to Ugui Sudani. Ugui Sudani. Ugh.
この辺りか。
Toji checked the address map in her
で
hand.
もなぜ六式は
ヤギ沼が恨まれているからじゃないのか。奴の取り調べは厳しいと知り合いが言っていたからな。
それの復讐をするような人には思えないんですよ。
No, the Rokushiki that Masuki knew would never be motivated by something so petty.
しかし、他に姉をさらう理由はないだろう。
なぜ危険を冒してまで病院から連れ出したのかがわからないんですよ。
If all he wanted was revenge, he could have just snuck into her hospital room and killed her.
何か別の目的があったとでも言うのか。
そうも考えられるというだ。
But he had no proof, truth be told.
別の目的か。
確か六式は妊婦や堕胎経験者を狙って殺人を繰り返していたんですよね。
それなのか。しかし、連れ出す理由にはなるまい。
昔時坂さんの婚約者だった女性は
ならば最初からヤギ沼の姉に狙いをつけていた恐れがあるか。
Toji suddenly stopped in front of an abandoned building.
ここは数年前から使われていない診療所だ。
Front door's glass was broken, allowing for a view indoors. The floor was littered with countless footprints, probably from looters in the destitute who needed a roof over their heads for a night. Masuki had to guess.
隠れ住むにしてももう少しマシなところにするでしょうね。他の人が入ってこないような。
だろうな。しかしいないことも証明して捜索の範囲を狭めなければね。
Toji gave Masuki a push on the
やっ
back.
ぱり自分が中に入るんですか。
暴漢がいたら大声で助けを呼べよ。
分かってますよ。
However, Masuki ultimately found no body. No hoodlums, no vagrants, no Rokushiki, no nothing.
ここではないようですね。
Toji crossed the location off her map.
次だ。近い場所だと谷中の方だな。
まだ行くんですか。
人の命がかかっているからな。少なくとも日付が変わる頃までに回れる場所は行くからな。
あ、そうですね。わかりました。
Masuki felt disgusted at himself for having the nerve to complain during an emergency like this. He slapped his cheeks a few times to revitalize himself before following Toji to the next location. It was past midnight, yet Yaginuma remained wide awake. The lights had gone out 3 hours ago, so the other patients were probably out cold. Furthermore, there were fewer and fewer nurses wandering the halls by the hour. Yaginuma sat up in bed. His stitched abdomen still ached. Fortunately, it wasn't so bad he couldn't move. Yaginuma got out of bed and changed his clothes. Oh, he's sneaking out. He needed to get out there. Luckily, he managed to sneak outside without anyone spotting him. Yaginuma decided his first order of business was to return home and get himself ready. He could probably still find taxis by Itabashi Station at this hour, fortunately. Yaginuma stepped into his apartment. Almost felt like someone else's home entirely after all the days he'd been away. Though he was tempted to pop open a bottle of wine, he knew he had far more pressing matters to take care of. Thus he pulled a few books out of his bookcase and retrieved a wooden box that had been sitting behind them. The box had once held a dish he'd bought as a wedding gift for someone. He took off the lid, then procured an object wrapped in a newspaper from within it. It was a gun he'd confiscated from a suspect in one of his many cases. Specifically, a Type 94 Nambu 8mm pistol, made from the Second World War, loaded with several bullets. It ended up in his possession due to a mishap by one of his subordinates after it had been confiscated. The gun was equipped with a 6-bullet magazine, but he flipped the safety on immediately without loading any shots into the chamber. For one, he didn't plan on using it right away, and two, he didn't wish to risk accidentally firing a round. Yaginuma rose to his feet and holstered the pistol beneath his waistband. All set. Only thing left to... Wait, something's off. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. What's off? Ozumi reviewed the files that had been delivered to his desk. Amongst them was a map with all the places they checked crossed off. The precincts had deployed men all across Tokyo, and yet they found neither hide nor hair of Rokushiki. They'd even resorted to requesting aid from the neighboring prefectures, such as Kanagawa, Saitama, and Yamanashi. Damn it, where the hell is that bastard? In any case, the investigation wasn't going well. And that went for Ozumi's own search for a traitor in his department too. There's simply too many officers for him to investigate, not that he'd expect to get through everyone in just a day, of course. To make matters worse, he found there were plenty of investigators who had contact with Rokushiki in the interrogation room over the past 2 years, so Ozumi had wasted no time in taking the liberty of swapping them out for others. Couldn't afford to have anyone on the team who might have been influenced by the man after all.
魚住警部補
The young investigator suddenly ran through CID Section 1's offices.
おうどうしたそれがすぐ前の堀で首のない女の死体が上がったとかなんだって
Ozumi jolted from his chair with such force that he knocked it over. Right in our own backyard? You've got to be shitting me. He scanned the room only to realize he was the highest ranking officer present. As such, it probably fall upon him to take charge of the initial investigation too. That's why Ozumi grabbed his coat and raced out of the room. The body truly had been right in their backyard. A crowd formed just across the street from the MPD. The majority of them were police officers. If nothing else, Ozumi wouldn't be short of hands.
仏はどこだ
Ozumi turned and directed his question at the officer who delivered the news.
まだ堀の中だと思いますがあそこです
The onlookers staring down into the canal, again, mostly police officers, made way for Ozumi. Before his very eyes was a female corpse, illuminated by camera flashes. She was missing her head nailed to a cross, exactly like the victims from 8 years ago. God damn it. I really wish I didn't have to tell Reiji about this. However, there was no mistaking his handiwork. What's more, he decided to dump the body right outside their offices, almost as if it were an act of revenge. I wouldn't necessarily say an act of revenge, but more so an act of like, see how well your investigation's going? I can dump it right here, you don't know a thing. I can just drop the body off right outside your front door. It's less like revenge and more so like smugness, arrogance. Feel like, look, I can do this, and there ain't a thing you can do about it. I can be right in front of you and you can't see me.
第一発見者はドイツだ本庁玄関で警備をしていた巡査です水音がしたので近づいたらこうなっていたと不審人物は水音がしてから逃走するような人物は見ていないとのことです
Taxis normally parked by this area in hopes of nabbing customers. Ozumi contemplated that possibility that one of them had seen something, but just as quickly realized Rokushiki couldn't have possibly set this up unless no one else had been around. That would match up with his MO perfectly too. Regardless, they had to follow protocol.
目撃証言を集めてくれそれと仏の鑑識写真を撮り終わったら
Though she was long dead, he would have felt bad leaving her out in the cold March water. Besides, they had to idea to uncover what clues about Makoto Rokushiki they could. God damn. Oh, Reiji. The phone rang. Ugh. Guess Yukari already left for school. Got out of bed and plodded over to the living room. Honestly,
はい、もしもし。
Reiji, at this point, how often do you get phone calls from anyone else? At this point, you should hear the phone and just dread and just be like, oh God. Oh God. Oh, more bad news. Because, like, you never get a phone call these days where it's just like, oh, hey, Reiji, I would just want to ask you a quick question. Just want to check in, see how you're doing. And you know, it's like, Reiji, we got problems. Takisaka, we got problems.
レイジか俺だ
何かあったのか？
Couldn't see any other reason he would call so early.
昨晩、桜田門から死体が上がった。若い女だが、状況が8年前のものと似通っている。
8年
In other words, 1950. There was only one case that came to mind when I thought of that year. Same case that had claimed the life of my fiancée, Yukiko Miyama.
貼り付けか。
頭部がないのも同様だ。
そうだな。
I managed to calm myself down. Do you leave the body like that specifically to spite me? No. Wait. What if it's not just me? After all, I had a good idea of who the victim was when considering the incident from yesterday. No, 2 days ago.
女の身元は？
まだわからん。ここ数日、六式が脱走してから捜索願いが出された女はいない。
Oh, you have got to be kidding me. Thought you said you were going to inform your superiors personally, you son of a bitch.
魚住、至急朽木病院から柳沼恵理子のカルテを取り寄せろ。おそらく彼女だ。
柳沼？おい、どういうことだね。
柳沼本人に聞いてくれ。今からそっちに向かう。
I hung up. Yaginuma didn't tell anyone about the kidnapping. If that was true, then I had to assume the worst.
独断で動いたところで今の六式は捕まえられないぞ。
I heard over to CID Section 1 and found a very sour-faced Ozumi waiting for me.
柳沼に連絡は取ったのか？
それがな、病院から抜け出したって話だ。
なんだよそりゃ。
I'm weak in the knees. Is that dumbass seriously trying to play cowboy right now?
病室からいなくなったのが昨日の消灯後、0時過ぎのようだ。
俺があいつに伝えたんだよ。
それについては朽木病院の医師から確認を取った。たく、単なる失踪ならともかく、動けない病人がいなくなった時点でこちら。
柳沼が自分で伝えると言ったんだよ。
今のところ服務規定に違反はしていねえが、早めにあいつの身柄も確保しておかないとならねえな。
そうだな。
I knew what it felt like to lose the most important person in your life. I knew what that did to people. So would Yaginuma follow my example once he learned his sister was dead? Because I didn't want to think about it, I wouldn't put it past him. And again, maybe he'd handle the grief better than I had.
遺体は
今司法解剖に回している。
And then, almost as if the devil himself had been listening, Natsume stepped into the room.
毎度どうも。
夏目さんが解剖を行ったんですか？
せや、ここのお部屋借りてな。概要が分かりましたから知らせに来ました
どうでしたか？
頭部がありまへんから死因までは分かりまへんでしたが、お腹が切られとりましたから、これによる失血死かもしれまへんな。だとすると死亡推定時刻は昨日午後から夜にかけてだと思います。子宮がごっそり抜き取られてますし、
六式の犯行と見て間違いないんですね。
貼り付けにされとったこともありますしな。仏藩から証拠は出てきてまへんが、
身元はどうでしたか？
柳沼恵理子藩の血液型と一致しました。手足も筋肉がほとんどのうなってて、床ずれもありましたから、ほぼ間違いないでしょうな。
Damn it. I hate when I'm right.
これが奴の目的か。
Ozumi turned to me.
一種返し。その可能性は高いな。
確か柳沼の姉は堕胎経験者だったな。
六式の標的になる資格があった。
But was that a coincidence? Or had he taken that into account from the start? Oh, he took it into account from the start.
六式は自分のルールをまだ逸脱していない。柳沼の姉のことは朽木病理学研究所にいた頃に知っていたのだろう
が。それだったら殺すために脱走したというのが成立しちまうんじゃねえのか。
That certainly was possible.
理由はひとまず置いときまして、六式藩のこともそうですけど、柳沼藩も探さなあきまへんちゃうん。
Natsume clapped to catch our attention.
そうですね。
Still, exactly what is Rokushiki after?
柳沼は病院から抜け出してどうするつもりだったんだろうな。
そりゃあエリコさんを探す。そうなると目的はやはり六式か。
I had to wonder if Yaginuma had an idea of where to find our resident runaway serial killer. Maybe Oroshiki had sent him a message of sorts.
魚住、柳沼の自宅を教えてくれ。
家に戻ってるのか？
わからん。だが何にせよ準備をする必要があるだろうさ。
In the meantime, I had to look for Rokushiki.
今調べる。
As we flip through what was likely a roster of CID Section 1's investigators.
ほいならうちは解剖の続きしてきますわ。そろそろ他の検査やなんやらも
よろしくお願いします。それと遺体はできるだけ綺麗なままでお願いします。
枠を取ります。遺族班に綺麗なままお返しするんわ。
Natsumi departed CID Section 1 with those final words. Masuki approached Shinjuku Station and caught sight of a familiar mop of silver hair strolling toward him.
青木さん、わざわざ来てもらってすみ。
こちらから向かった方が近いようだからな。
ええ、表参道だそうです。
いいところに住んでいるな。同潤会か。
いや、アパートのようですけど。
さすがエリートは違うな。
Toji snorted sarcastically.
まずは移動しましょう。柳沼さんがどこへ行ったか手がかりを見つけないと。
Masuki and Toji took the train over to Harajuku Station and headed down Aoyama toward Omotesando. On their left were communal apartments. There were also many shops in the area marked with the American soldiers who lived in the nearby Washington Heights.
随分とモダンな街ですね。
他の場所と比べればな。この辺りは空襲でやられてから建て直したというのもあるのだろう。
この辺ですね。
Masuki checked the address that Eiji had provided him earlier.
そこのアパートのようだな。
Toji pointed to a building made of concrete.
いますかね。
まさか家でのんびりするために病院を抜け出したわけでもあるまい。
鍵がかけられていたらどうしようもありませんね。大家さんに事情を話すわけにもいかないでしょうし。
探偵なのだから鍵開けくらいで。
できませんよ、そんな。
探偵は皆習熟していると思ったのだが。
Toji grinned fondly as they ascended the apartment complex's stairs.
この部屋です。
Masuki and Toji stood before a sturdy-looking
新
door.
聞がないな。取っていないだけかもしれない。
Toji checked the mail slot in the door.
さすがに見えないか。静かに。
Toji held her hand out to Masuki before he could raise his voice, then silently closed the door again.
中に柳沼がいる可能性はまだある。不法侵入と騒がれるのは尺だが。
呼び鈴を押したら逃げ出したりしませんかね。
それもある。奴が何を思って病院を抜け出したのかがわからんからな。
If Yaginuma simply wanted to save his sister from Rokushiki, he could have just sent the police after them. Yet he snuck off without informing anyone instead, meaning he's likely trying to find them on his own. Why, though? That's not like him.
静かにしていろよ。
Toji opened the door
普
again.
段使っていそうな靴は残っていないな。戻ってきていないのか。
ですが、こじ開けられた様子もありませんよ。
Masuki examined the doorknob before concluding as much.
鍵のかけ忘れか。入るぞ。
Meaning he left in a hurry. Toji took off her shoes and stepped inside. Masuki quickly followed suit.
何が起こったんですか。
Masuki's eyes widened when he saw the trashed apartment.
わからん。
Toji shook her head. A potted plant had been knocked over, sprinkling the floor in dirt.
物取りですかね。
それは調べればわかることだ。
そうですね。
Thus, Masuki decided to investigate Yaginuma's apartment with Toji. Oh, actual investigation? Alright, I'll lock in. Okay. Sofa? Masuki touched the sofa, but found no lingering warmth or anything like that, much to his lack of surprise. We probably wouldn't have been able to tell if anyone had been sitting there in the first place anyway. Okay. Carpet? Hardwood? Table? There was a white wine bottle on the table that was resting on its side.
いい酒だな。半分も残ってはいないが。
Toji set the bottle back up.
飲んではいないようですね。
There were no wine glasses anywhere after all. Given the state of the apartment, Masuki doubted whoever had been in here would have been so kind as to put them back in the kitchen.
病院から抜け出してきていきなり飲むなんてことあるかもしれないが。
Toji abruptly changed her mind partway through her response.
入院して節制していたら飲みたくなりそうですけれど。
確かにそうだ。用事があるとはいえ、自宅に戻ってきて一息もついていない感じがするな。
部屋が荒らされていたからですかね。
帰ってきた時にすでにこの状況であれば落ち着いてなどいられないが。
Toji surveyed the room.
他も調べれば何かわかるかもしれないな。
ええ、そうしましょう。
Put this little box up here. wooden boxes on the floor.
何が入っていたんですかね。
Masuki studied the interior carefully, but all he found was newspaper that had been utilized as wrapping paper.
結婚記念。
There were two surnames on the lid. Masuki didn't recognize either of them
見せ
naturally.
てくれ。
Toji held her hand out to Masuki.
はい。
蓋じゃない。そっちの新聞だ。
これですか。
Masuki passed her the newspaper in the box.
まさき、この折り目に沿って曲げてみてくれ。
わかりました。
Masuki did as Toji asked if she gave him back the newspaper. By doing so, he ended up creating a triangular bundle.
拳銃ですか。
大きさも合うな。ヤギ沼のやつが隠し持っていたのか。
でもなんでそんなこと。
After all, an investigator like Yaginuma shouldn't have had any issues carrying his own police-issued pistol instead.
こういう時のために確保していたのかもしれないな。
こういう時。
最初からそれを想定していたわけではないだろう。警察官として立ち回れなくなった時に備えてのことなのだろうな。
よほどの覚悟があったんですね。
Okay, I just want to double check and like click everything at least twice because I know that's been the case in previous games. So far with this game, that hasn't really been a worry about like clicking it multiple times. But just want to make sure. The floor was littered with soil from an upturned potted plant. Furthermore, the pot had broken in two, making it impossible to tell what originally had been in
た
there.
だ桁をしただけではないようだな。
鉢植えを叩きつけたんでしょうか。
問題は誰がそうしたかということだが、そう時間は経っていないようだな。
Masuki bent down and scooped up some of the soil as per Toji's example. It was indeed moist. Curious, Masuki crushed it, only to find something red sticking to his fingers.
血。
If so, then it wasn't water that dampened the soil.
見せてみろ。
Toji grabbed Masuki's hand.
確かに血のようだな。
Okay. So while Masuki was rummaging around in his apartment, I'm guessing it was Rokushiki then that smashed him over the back of the head with the potted plant. Toji examined the soil on the floor
植
again.
木鉢の外側に血はついていませんから、これで誰かを殴ったというわけではないようですね。
Oh, never mind. That meant it was unlikely that Yaginuma had either been assaulted or assaulted someone.
土が少ないと思わないか。
Toji's comment prompted Masuki to scan the floor. She's right. There should be more soil with a pot that big. You can only fill up about half the pot with this much. Masuki piled up the soil just to be safe, but it still came out as so little.
これは
It was only when soil was all together that Masuki noticed there were many long hairs mixed in with it.
量が多いな。単なる抜け毛ではない。
Toji studied the hair
女
carefully.
性の髪の毛ですよね。
ああ。なんとなく予想はついてきたな。
自分もです。おそらくこの植木鉢に柳沼恵理子さんの頭部が埋められていたのでしょう。
And that was his sign that it was too late.
それをヤギ沼が見つけてしまい、反響乱となって鉢を壊した。
6式しかいない。
他に該当する人物もいないな。奴だとするならば、侵入方法やこの場所を知ったきっかけなど考えても無駄だろうな。
なぜこのような真似をしたのか。恵理子さんをさらったのは柳沼さんに対する意趣返しじゃないかと時。
That was ultimately nothing more than a hypothesis, though.
人の心をもてあそぶのが
Yeah,
よほど楽しいと
that's the thing. I don't think it's revenge. I don't think he has like this long, deep-seated hatred for Yaginuma. It's probably just like after 2 years of Yaginuma being the cocky prick that he is, now all of a sudden he's just like, yeah, look who's running things now. Look who's got the jump on you. Look who's got you. You know, look who's 2 steps ahead of you now at every twist and turn. Yeah, you're not the great superintendent you think you are you? No. He's just taunting him. He's just playing with him. It's a game. Toji
た
growled.
だ、そこには何らかの計算があると思います。
Oh no, that's
た
the
だ
thing.
それだけのために恵理子さんをさらって殺すというのも考え
Yo
にくいです。
checked all the boxes. But it was just also convenient to really fuck with Yaginuma. Unless there's something between the Yaginumas and Rokushiki and everything that went down in Rokushiki's past that are connected that we don't know about. It's possible, I suppose.
そうだな。今はまずこの土や割れた鉢を証拠として確保しておくことにしよう。
わかりました。
Double check again. What about this one? Potted plant was standing there. It was starting to wither, sign that hadn't been given much care. Okay. Photo? Photo of what appeared to be siblings stood there. The boy with the innocent face was probably Yaginuma, so the girl smiling next to him had to be Eriko. Could they be books? Masuki found thick tomes of what appeared to be law. Suppose Yaginuma really does study, huh? I'm gonna click each individual book. Never know. One bottle there. Another plant? Plant likely wasn't watered out too frequently. Okay, not that one. Plant. Okay. Curtains, the wall. Books. Books. Phone. There was a bookcase against the wall. Within it were books and a
こ
phone.
の辺りは荒らされた様子がないな。
物取りに入られたというわけじゃないの。
Coins were splayed around right next to the phone. Furthermore, water and electric bills were stacked there as well. Near them were two separate phone bills. Odd. I only saw one phone line. Books from a series all grouped together. They appeared to be foreign detective novels. Okay. Drinks. Fancy bottles of alcohol were lined up. While they weren't empty, there were no signs they'd been touched recently either. Up here, up here, up here, up. Oh.
何かを取り出したようだな。
Doji turned away from a row of books she'd been
わ
investigating.
かるんですか？
Masuki examined the books in question but found nothing that would have led him to the same conclusion.
棚板の埃が文庫本の背表紙に引っかかっているだろう。最近この辺りの本を引き抜いたようだ。
Masuki took a closer look at the shelf to find clear marks that the books had indeed been moved out.
それに、やけに手前に本を並べている。
Doji pushed one of the books about 5 centimeters back to prove her point. That was over half the space available on the bookshelf. While there were some who organized their books like that, Yaginuma did not seem the type.
柳沼さんが取り出したんでしょうか。
だろうな。これだけに気づく物取りなんてそういないさ。
But if that's true, then what was he hiding behind them? Okay, nothing in the corners. Alright, gotta double check all the corners. All the blank space. Corners. 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 Okay, I think we're good.
なんとなく状況は分かったな。
Alright, we clicked on everything.
え
Masuki and Toji focused on the soil from the broken
え。
pot.
おそらく柳沼さんはここでお姉さんの頭部を見つけたんでしょう。
おおよそそんなところだろうな。しかし、その柳沼はどこへ向かったのか。
その前に病院を抜け出したことが知られれば、ここに警察の人間が来ますよね。
Masuki was of the mind that Yaginuma hadn't gone looking for Rokushiki just yet.
一旦身を隠すんじゃないでしょうか。復讐するにしろ、また病院に戻されたりしたら難しいですし。
関係者には見つかりたくないか。奴くらいの上級職であれば、ここ以外にもセーフハウスを持っていてもおかしくはないな。
セーフハウス？
隠れ家だよ。本住所を知られたくなかったり、非合法のものを隠し持ったり。
A hideout, in other words.
そういえばさっき電話の明細書が2通ありました。
Masuki showed the bills he found to Toji.
4で始まる市内局番と8で始まるものか。どちらも23区内だな。
4で始まる方です。
Masuki double-checked his notebook to be safe.
そうなると、こちらの番号が隠れ家のものか。
If so, there was very likely someone hiding there. Though it concerned Masuki that someone was Yaginuma rather than
かけ
Rokushiki.
てみますか。
バカ。気づかれたら逃げるに決まっているだろうが。一旦戻って、この番号の住所を調べさせるぞ。
Think we could call it?
はい。
Oh, Masuki. You silly little guy.
そうか。わかった。気をつけて戻ってきてくれ。
Alrighty, but unfortunately, that is where I have to wrap it up for tonight. Man, even though I've been recording for almost 6 hours, it just still feels like not enough time. Like, I came into this recording session hyped and excited. I wanted to see where everything led, and I'm still that way now. I don't, like, Ah. I'm so excited to see where things keep going, man. I am. I have to wrap it up for tonight. I don't want to. Oh, I don't want to. Uh, I love these games though. I love these games. They just get me so excited. I'm loving it. I'm loving it. Fuck. I don't want to wrap it up for tonight. But unfortunately, I will have to wrap it up tonight. So it's either going to be a quick transition or a quick jump cut, regardless. No. But it's either going to be a quick transition or a new video. But regardless, I'll see y'all in the next one, which will probably come sooner than later. Because, God, I need more of this. But until then, peace.